Hello there. Today we're going to be talking about how I prepare for presentations. But before we get into my method, I think we need to talk about why presentations are something that we should strive to be good at. So, if you're in high school or early on in your time in college, you might not have to give very many presentations. And so you're wondering, why would I devote so much effort to becoming good at something that plays a minor role in my grade? Well, the college answer to that is that the longer you spend in education, the more presentations you'll have to give, and in general, the longer those presentations will be. And once you move into graduate school, your presentations become even longer. Say, sophomore year of college, I took a class on public speaking. Or perhaps it was the second semester of first year, but early on in my college career, I took a class on public speaking. Very short presentations, all under 15 minutes. Some of them were under 5 minutes. And they didn't require all that much depth or preparation. But by the time I made it to my final semester of senior year, really the only semester of my senior year, it was done in one semester early. But by that semester, I had to present my thesis research, my undergraduate thesis research, at the university conference. And that was closer to 20 or 30 minutes of talking about my work. And so we see that just in a bachelor's degree, the presentations get longer and they're more in depth. If you compare that to where I am in graduate school now, in my first year of graduate school, I had some presentations that were 10, 15 minutes. But I also had presentations that were 45 minutes to an hour long. So being able to speak well is going to be a boon for you the longer you spend in education. And if we think about presentations outside of education, they're also important. You might think of presenting in a boardroom and say, well, that won't ever be me. And while it might be useful there, that's just not going to be me, so I don't need to worry about it. Well, what presentations ultimately come down to, their essential components, is being able to communicate effectively in either an informative or an entertaining or a persuasive way. And whether or not you will be in a position where you have to give formal presentations, you will be called upon to speak effectively. And learning to be good at presentations is one of the best ways to learn how to speak effectively, to communicate your message, to get people on your side, and to convince them of the plan. And so, while you're getting graded in college on your presentation skills, and you get a numerical score back, you're also being graded after college on your ability to present and to speak. And while you won't be getting a numerical score, at least not in any cases I've ever seen, people will be judging you on it. And so that's why I believe presentation skills are so vital, even if they're only making up 5 or 10% of your grade at your point in college right now, that they will make a huge impact in your life. It'll be much more effective in your communication if you begin practicing now. Because really the way to get better at presenting is to present a lot, which is part of the reason I started this YouTube channel, was to hone my skills at presenting because of how important I think they are. Now, let's get into my method for presenting. But first, let's take a brief detour to my goals. So when I'm presenting, I have 3 general goals that I use to guide my method. The first is that I want to speak clearly with as minimal a resource or a reference material as possible. So I never wanted to be the person who was standing there with cards and was going through their cards, flipping through their cards and reading from them. I also didn't want to be the person who was always looking at their PowerPoint and reading from their PowerPoint. I wanted to be comfortable enough with the material that I could give the presentation and check the reference materials only as needed, and hopefully not at all in a presentation, that they would be a tool to help facilitate the understanding of what I'm saying, but not a tool to get me through my presentation, not a crutch. My second goal is that I want to hit my time window. In college, it's obvious why you want to hit your time window, because If you're under, you'll lose points, and if you're over, you'll lose points. However, if we go beyond college and talk about our presentations, meeting our time window has a lot to do with respect, and a way to demonstrate that you respect the time of the people who are listening. And by going over or under, you're either not respecting their time or you're under-delivering what you said you would deliver. Now, you won't always be able to hit your time window. Sometimes things will come up and you won't have enough time to refine your presentation to where it hits that window exactly. But you want to be as close as you can with the time you have to prepare. My third goal is to see if there are any weak areas in my presentation, areas where I think I'm going to get questioned in the question and answer that's so common at the end of academic presentations and frankly is common in all presentations. If you're trying to convince somebody of something or to teach them something, they're going to have questions about it, no matter how good of a job you do presenting. You can't be prepared for everything, but I like to try. I like to say, well, this felt kind of weak. What kind of question would go in there? Can I fix that, ideally? That's the ideal choice. Or can I come up with an answer that solves the issue? So what is the most likely question I'm going to be asked at this weak point, and what answer would I give to that if I'm asked that question? By preparing that in advance, I'm more able to respond to questions effectively. So how do I achieve these goals? Well, I have 6 different steps that I go through. The first is that I use a paper outline of the topics and themes that I want to be included in my presentation. This is so that I can be organized and coherent. I like to do this on paper just because I like to use fountain pens, and I like the feel of paper under my hands, and I like that it's very easy to scratch things out, and by scratching them out, you still see what was there originally and what you replaced it with. It's certainly not for everyone, but some form of outlining what you're going to be preparing for your presentation. The second step is that I prepare the materials needed for the presentation, so whether those are slides or handouts or any number of things that are specific to that presentation. I want to make sure that I have those prepared. So based on the outline, I would create my slides or my handout. The third is that I use a dry run. I go through the presentation with all my materials in front of me, and I start a timer and I go through everything. When I get stuck, I stop, leaving the timer going, and look through my materials to see what I need to say next, and adding in any notes of areas where I felt were particularly weak, that third goal of mine. So seeing where I can address that, or that was an awkward phrasing, how should I say that to be most effective? Then I continue practice. Step 4 is I continue practicing until I'm comfortable with the material and I can barely rely on my reference materials. They're basically not there. It's becoming an automatic presentation. The 5th step is that I prepare all of my materials as far in advance of the presentation as I can. It's sort of an old wives' tale to say that if you wait until right before your presentation to print, the printer will always jam. But if you're waiting until later to prepare things, you're adding more, you're making it harder on you if something goes wrong. So if you have to print the day before. That way, if the printer jams, you don't have to worry and get stressed, which will cause you to get confused in your presentation in the order, and you don't want any additional stress when you're presenting. Just the stress of the presentation is enough for me. I don't see why I'd want any more from having technical difficulties. This is also why I put any slides of mine on a thumb drive instead of pulling it up through email. Specifically at SFA, I've sat in on a lot of presentations, and when we have a lot of presentations, one after the other, and people are logging into their emails, whether that's a Gmail or the Outlook email through the university, there are issues when you're the 3rd or 4th person logging in, or perhaps even the 2nd person logging in, of, well, you somehow entered your information, but you're logging into the other person's email address, so you can't access your materials. And so you really set yourself up for success by using a thumb drive or by logging into that computer ahead of time and downloading your presentation onto the computer in advance. So that was step 5. Step 6 is that I want to arrive early so that I can have everything scoped out. I know exactly where the computer is. I know exactly how the projector works. I know exactly how everything I need, whether it's the overhead or the Elmo, everything has been scoped out. I know how it works. I'm familiar with the setting. Ideally, I can be logged into the computer and move my presentation slides directly onto the presenting computer before I would need to, so 10, 15 minutes ahead of time. If you're in a class that I'm a teaching assistant for, I'll typically be there 10, 15 minutes beforehand with the computer logged in so that people can do that, and we can have quick transitions between one person and the next person. And so there you have it. That is how I prepare for presentations. It's a lot of work to prepare for presentations, but each presentation you give, 1, it builds your confidence, and 2, it makes the process easier. Having prepared the presentations this semester has made me better at presenting. It makes it easier for me to go through my steps. It makes it easier for me to decide on the themes and the topics I'll be addressing and to prepare materials that facilitate your understanding of what I'm trying to present. And so I'd say, even if it's tough to begin with, stick with it. Being able to present effectively is an essential skill because really, at its essence, it is just communicating effectively. And to be able to have an effect in the world, you really do need to be able to communicate effectively. And while that can be in a written format, and I encourage you to be good at the written format, I think it's also important to be effective in the spoken format as well. And so that is my method. If you don't have a method, give mine a try, but be aware that you may need to adjust it for what you do. You may not like having a paper outline. You may not like having as many dry runs as I do. You might not like showing up 15 minutes early. Find what works for you that you can stick with so that you have some effective way of setting up for success when it comes to presentations. All right. Best of luck to you. And until next time, cheers.